Tonight, what were they up to? Pakistan is expected to deport 5 Muslim Americans suspected of trying to link up with al-Qaeda. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, staring down death. A brave Mexican police chief refuses to give in to drug cartels who are killing his officers one by one. A heartbreaking fraud. Americans who thought they'd adopted Samoan orphans find their parents want them back. And how a father filled with flaws raised his son to be a champion in tonight's American Spirit.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. The case gets stranger by the hour. 5 Muslim Americans are being held in Pakistan, where they were allegedly trying to link up with terrorists. That's according to Pakistani police. But back home in Northern Virginia, friends and family say they never saw any signs they had become radicals. 3 were born in the U.S., 1 in Egypt, and 1 other in Pakistan. All are U.S. citizens, and they could face conspiracy charges. Justice correspondent Bob Orr is following the investigation. And Bob, the FBI really wants to bring these men back to the States.
Yes, Katie, they do. But so far, the FBI has only been able to briefly talk to the Muslim Americans and read them their rights. They've not yet been charged, but Pakistan also is not ready to send them home. While the young Americans remain in a Pakistani jail, police there have now released their mugshots. 5 college-age students who police say were intent on joining up with Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters.
They were here for jihad. We suppose that they were here for some very bad activities.
CBS News has obtained this Pakistan police interrogation report, which contains the men's passport information and pictures of laptops and mobile phones confiscated when they were arrested in this house. Seized computer files suggest the group had reached out to a terrorist operative through the internet.
Once again, the Taliban is warning more bombings should be expected.
The report claims this YouTube video and others showing terror attacks against U.S. troops prompted one of the men, Ahmed Abdullah Mini, to begin communicating with a shadowy terror suspect, identified only as Saifullah. Pakistan police say in an effort to avoid detection, the men did not use email. Instead, they left messages in a draft folder, all could access with a common password.
We're going to have a quick award ceremony.
U.S. officials say the group, led by Howard University dental student Rami Zamzam, left Washington's Dulles Airport in 2 groups, 3 flying out on November 28th, the other 2 a day later. Sources say the 5 flew through England and met up in Karachi, Pakistan, December 1st. All are U.S. citizens who traveled with legal passports and visas indicating they were sightseeing and going to the wedding of a friend. But Pakistani police say once there, the men immediately raised suspicions when they tried to hook up with 2 separate terrorist groups. They were not successful, turned away as Westerners who did not speak the local language.
What makes this different, regardless of whether or not these guys were amateurs or not, is the fact that they are a group of radicalized individuals who plan to go over to Pakistan together to engage in what may have been training or attacks.
Families and friends who alerted the FBI when the 5 went missing insist the men are not terrorists.
I have always known these kids as fun-loving, career-focused children.
Mustafa Mariam is the youth counselor at a Virginia mosque the men attended.
During my time knowing these young men, I never observed any extreme behavior from them. I never became suspicious that they were planning to do harm to anyone else.
Now, if Pakistan does not press charges, the men likely will be returned to the U.S. Then the FBI will have to decide if they committed some kind of crime. Katie?
Bob Orr in Washington. Bob, thank you. We know more tonight about an American missile strike that took place in Pakistan earlier this week. U.S. officials now say the missile fired from a drone aircraft took out one of al-Qaeda's top men. Saleh al-Somali was believed to be planning attacks here in the United States and in Europe. Now to a war against a different kind of terrorists being fought just south of our border. Police had shootouts with drug gangs this week in 2 towns in western Mexico. 6 officers and 5 gang members were killed. Meanwhile, Tijuana has been overrun by cartels that smuggle drugs into the U.S. But that city's police chief has become a model of how to stand up to the drug lords. And while he has brought the civilian death rate down, it's come at a great cost to his department. Bill Whitaker has more about this extraordinary man.
attending funerals is a growing part of Tijuana Police Chief Julian Leizaola's job. 28 officers killed this year so far, double last year's toll in an escalating war against rich, ruthless drug cartels.
When
an officer dies, you feel the weight of the death.
For Leizaola, an extra burden. Cartel killers threaten to murder 5 officers a week until he leaves office.
Yo lo considero más como una complicidad hacia los...
To even consider that would make me an accomplice of the cartels. I will never resign.
This wasn't what he expected when we met him a year ago. New on the job, the former Army Lieutenant Colonel was gunning for the drug gangsters.
A que sientan...
If the cartels only understand the language of violence, then we are going to have to speak in their language and annihilate them.
Easier said than done. Leizaola soon realized he didn't just have to clean the drug criminals off the streets, he had to clean them out of his own police department. He says he investigated all 2,200 officers. 460 were fired or, like these arrested officers, jailed for having ties to drug cartels.
Hemos consignado mucha gente.
We have prosecuted commanders, chiefs, officers, those who served as the eyes and ears of the drug cartels in the department.
And now?
Pero ya con una guerra abierta.
We have declared war against these criminals. They must understand, to face a cop is to face their enemy.
But this is the enemy Leizaola faces. Flush with drug profits, the cartels have more firepower than ever. This anti-aircraft gun seized from gangsters near Mexico City. They're more brazen than ever. In central Mexico, cartel thugs dressed as police broke 50 inmates out of a high-security prison, then drove off in police cars. In Michoacan, they tortured and killed 12 federal agents and piled their bodies by the road. This year in Juarez, the world's deadliest city, urban warfare between rival gangs has taken 862 more lives than last year's grisly record. In Tijuana, while Leizaola was rebuilding his police department, the cartels were building too. 6 drug tunnels discovered under the U.S.-Mexico border in the last year. We got an exclusive look at this elaborate one newly found. It's about 33 feet deep, about 166 feet long, and authorities caught and stopped the cartels just 50 feet short of the U.S. border. As for Leizaola, he always travels with 15 bodyguards. But everywhere you go, day and night, all the time.
Every time.
After a cartel tried and failed to bribe him, it tried to kill him. Using military uniforms and camouflage vehicles, they'd planned to blow up police headquarters. That foiled plot, the 4th attempt to assassinate him.
Yo sigo peleando por México.
I'm fighting for Mexico. I will continue fighting until my last days.
Fighting a war that seems to have no end. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Tijuana, Mexico.
Now to the weather here at home. Bitter cold from the Midwest to the Northeast. National correspondent Jim Axelrod is in Times Square tonight. And Jim, even the bright lights of Broadway could not get the temperature above freezing today.
Well, Katie, that storm that started out west and has hit 2/3 of the country is now working its way east. Here in Times Square, the whipping winds make it feel like it's about 15 degrees. This is one frozen calling card.
Wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour are creating whiteout conditions on the roads in Buffalo, New York.
It's Buffalo. You gotta just deal with it.
And now the snow's coming down hard, too. Upstate New York, northern Pennsylvania, and New England could see up to 3 feet by tomorrow. A section of the New York State Thruway is already closed.
The road will remain closed. It's not going to be open for several more hours, but those people that were stranded, we're getting them off the Thruway.
On its path east, the storm produced a record low in Seattle, 16 degrees. It hit 27 below in Big Piney, Wyoming, -3 degrees in Minneapolis, and -5 in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where the new traffic lights are useless. It seems in weather this cold, the new energy-saving LED bulbs don't give off enough heat to melt the ice.
I think the city should do something about it because it is very dangerous, and if you can't see the lights, you don't know if you're good to go or if you're not.
Now it's the Northeast's turn to get pounded.
It's bad enough with the cold that we've seen. You factor in the wind, it's made it feel like the single numbers and teens, easily one of the coldest days we've had in quite some time.
So far, the storm has claimed 17 lives heading into this weekend, with more frigid weather in the forecast. Katie?
All right, Jim, it's brutal out there. Come inside. Thanks so much. From the cold now to the flu, we're making progress in the battle against H1N1. The CDC said today the virus was widespread last week in only 14 states, mostly in the Northeast. That's down from 25 the week before and 48 in late October. But health officials warn the virus, which has already hit an estimated 47 million Americans, could make a comeback. And coming up next on the CBS Evening News, two sets of parents claiming the same child, all victims of a huge adoption scam exposed by CBS News. Imagine what a nightmare this would be to learn that your child is not really yours after all. The toddler you adopted just a few months ago, who you thought was an orphan, is not. And now the parents want her back. After a 2.5-year investigation by 48 Hours, Maureen Maher has the story of one of the biggest foreign adoption scams in U.S. history.
It all started here in Samoa, an island nation in the South Pacific, when more than 80 children were adopted by American parents through the adoption agency Focus on Children.
What were you told about this little girl's background?
That her parents could not put food on the table to feed her, and they wanted her to be able to have a meal and be able to have a better life.
Was she technically an orphan?
That's what we were told.
The cost seemed reasonable, about $13,000. So Mike and Carrie Nyberg agreed to adopt the 3-year-old little girl, who they named Aaliyah. They were told she had been living in FOC's orphanage for months. It wasn't until they brought her home to Utah,
Aaliyah,
when she began to settle in and learn English,
say hi, Daddy,
that they began to suspect something was wrong with her adoption.
She started talking about how she would sleep on the floor, and she started naming her parents and her siblings.
she's hurting and she's missing her family.
The Nybergs decided to find out what the intentions of her birth parents really were.
We wanted to find out the truth.
But the truth would have heart-wrenching consequences, and not just for the Nybergs, but for dozens of American families.
Initially, there was a lot of shock. They were afraid that their family was going to fall apart.
Look what I did.
57 American families, like the Minslers in Texas and Patty Sawyer in Wisconsin, discovered that their adoptions may be fraudulent.
I can do 10 cartwheels.
While they believed they had adopted orphans, the Samoan families, all poor and uneducated, believed they had signed their children up for a foster program and that their children would be coming home at age 18.
I was lied to.
It's all a lie.
Lies.
Focus on Children lied to us and the Samoan parents.
Now the question on every parent's mind was, will I have to give up my child?
Regardless of what happened and regardless of what Focus did, we made a vow to her to be her parents for life. We are her parents, and nothing is going to change that.
Much to the dismay of many of the parents, the owners of and the 5 employees of Focus on Children managed to plead down over 100 felony charges to just a handful of misdemeanors. But perhaps even more troubling, the criminal case never addressed the legality of the adoptions. We talked to 3 American families in Saturday night's 48 Hours about what that means for them. Katie?
All right, Maureen, such a sad story. Thanks very much. And as Maureen said, the story continues on 48 Hours tomorrow night at 10, 9 Central, right here on CBS. And coming up next, can we buy our way to an economic recovery? Americans are starting to spend again. The money you and I spend when we go shopping is the driving force of our economy. So it was good to hear today that retail sales rose last month more than twice as much as expected. But is it the beginning of a trend? We asked Anthony Mason to find out.
American shoppers opened their wallets a little wider in November as sales for everything other than cars rose at the fastest pace since January. And the gains, stronger than expected, crossed most categories, from sales at grocery stores, which grew 1%, to sales at electronics stores, which jumped nearly 3%. Sales at building materials stores had their biggest rise in more than a year and a half. There were weak spots. Furniture and clothing sales both dipped in November, but overall economists were encouraged.
Basically, it's encouraging that we're spending money. I don't much care what we spend it on.
David Weiss says it's even more encouraging when taken with the improving unemployment numbers we saw last week.
All of that suggests we've somehow hit a tipping point here, and we're starting to see some acceleration.
Maybe, but early reports suggest December sales have started slowly. This is the make or break month for many retailers, and analysts say the real test will come in the next 2 weeks.
Retailers, as they always do when they're up against a consumer who doesn't want to spend, they're going to blink and they're going to discount. So, I mean, you're going to get some great deals the week before Christmas, and frankly, you're going to get better deals the week after Christmas.
Consumer spending drives about 2/3 of the economy, so the next 2 weeks could be a good measure of how strong the recovery really is. Katie?
All right, Anthony Mason. Anthony, thank you. Have a great weekend and
You too.
go shopping. And breaking news now from Florida. Tiger Woods, embroiled in controversy since that SUV crash a couple of weeks ago, has decided to take an indefinite break from professional golf. And coming up next, the American spirit, a proud father hoping to watch his son run into the record books. We end tonight with one of college football's biggest stars, determined to repeat his father's success on the field, but not the mistakes he made in life. Jeff Glor now with an exclusive story about a father, a son, and their special bond in tonight's American Spirit.
In the biggest game of his life, Alabama running back Mark Ingram had perhaps the best game of his life. 3 touchdowns last Saturday against the country's top-ranked team, Florida, turning himself into a Heisman Trophy favorite. For a fabled program once run by the legendary Bear Bryant that's produced Joe Namath and Kenny Stabler, Ingram would make history.
Just crazy that I might be able to bring the program the first Heisman Trophy. It's just a dream come true.
Watching it all, his proud father.
I think it was about the 6th grade he came to me. He said, well, Daddy, I'm going to be a better football player than you.
19-year-old Mark Jr. learned the game from his dad, beginning at age 3.
Going deep, and Ingram's open.
Mark Sr., a 10-year NFL pro,
Caught by Ingram.
a 1991 Super Bowl champion with the New York Giants, was a tough love teacher.
He used to be so hard on me all the time, just so rough on me, and I didn't really understand it. And he's always said that I would love him for it later. And now that I'm getting older, I kind of understand it.
They know when Alabama's on TV, everybody gives me the remote, and we sit down and we watch my son play.
Mark Sr. has to share that remote with his fellow inmates because he watches his son's games not in person, but in prison, waiting to be formally sentenced on bank fraud and money laundering charges. Captured as a fugitive early this year, he now faces 10 years behind bars. This week, from inside the New York City jail where he's being held, he spoke out about his son's remarkable accomplishments for the first time.
He has to be his own person, be his own man, take and learn from what I've done, my mistakes that I've made.
And it seems Mark Jr. is learning from those mistakes. A sophomore now, he's scheduled to graduate from college a year early. Father and son still talk 3 to 4 times a week, up to 30 minutes each time. Mark Jr. hoping to avoid what his father did wrong and repeat what he did right.
Because I know he's going through a tough situation and everything's not always easy. And just the fact that I could bring that joy to him, is real special to me.
Each man says no one is more important in his life than the other.
He's not only my father, he's my best friend too, so.
Well, I'll be there, in spirit. I know that that the success that he has had, that I had a hand in it.
Next month, Mark Jr. will play for the national championship. At such a young age, on his shoulders he carries a team, newfound stardom, and the legacy and spirit of a troubled father, a man who ran from his troubles, while his son tries to run through them. Jeff Glor, CBS News, New York.
And if you know someone who embodies the American spirit, let us know at cbsnews.com and we may tell his or her story. And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric in New York. Thank you for watching this week. Jeff Glor will be here tomorrow, and I'll see you on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend. Good night.